I am a son of Lebanese parents born in New York.
My identity is often questioned.
I'm from Israel, living in California.
We basically grew up very assimilated.
Pinanganak ako sa Pilipinas.
ببيان بلبنان من عمر السبع سنين.
Identifico como Latina.
אני ליאור, אני ישראלי.
Mind, body, and ancestry integration. This is migration.
Hello, I am so excited to introduce this beautiful guest today. She is my wonderful friend, Cristal. Thank you so much for being here with us today. To start us off, what was your journey like in finding your therapist or therapists?
Okay, well, yes, thank you for having me. So I can remember 3 distinct occasions of therapy. So the first was shortly after I got married. Not saying my husband was the cause of the therapy, but that was just the time that it happened. I was having a really difficult time in life. And honestly, I don't remember the specific details for finding that person. I know that I did not have a lot of money. We did not have health insurance at the time. To be young and in love. We did not have health insurance at the time. I ended up finding this woman through my church. So she was not licensed, but she was clinically had gone through the training as, I can't remember if it was a counselor or a social worker in particular. And she had an inner healing, focus on the work. So that was important to me because I love Jesus, but just quote unquote Christian counselors, I'm I want somebody with clinical training. That was important to me. So it was just a benefit that, she knew him and just had that clinical background. So the second person, I actually had a friend that was a social worker that lived here. She's no longer here anymore. And I'd asked her for some recommendations. I think in that season of life, it was important for me for it to be a woman and for her to be Black. So I interviewed a couple of people, and found her. And then kind of similar story to my current therapist. She came by recommendation and she is lovely, probably my favorite so far. But yes, I remember feeling frustrated or there being a lot of options and not really knowing what to look for, especially those first 2 times. There's 50 million modalities. So I'm just I don't even know. It just was not something that was on my radar. So that was a big thing. I feel like I am, my third therapist and am well-versed in the world of therapists finding, or whatever. So yes.
You mentioned that it was important for you for your therapist to be a woman and for her to be a Black woman. And I'm curious, how did you know that was important to you? How did you know, is that a deal breaker for you? We've had folks here sharing with us also that they began therapy thinking that was a deal breaker. And then they realized that actually wasn't a great match to be with someone that shared, certain aspects of their culture or ethnic identity. So I'm curious, how did you know that was true for you? Is it still true for you? And how do you think that shapes the way that you engage in therapy?
So I think the first therapist, I don't know if that was a thing. Maybe, I don't know. Let me not make stuff up because I don't remember. I don't recall. She ended up being white. And it was fine. I feel for the most part, it was just so much going on. I don't even think that was my primary concern or whatever. I just really needed the support and had limited funds to do so. So I think that was just what it was back then, which I think is a real thing. Even now for people that either don't have health insurance because of their profession, don't feel comfortable using their insurance because of the questions that can be asked and all the things that kind of go along with that. So access to care, I know is a big stumbling block for a lot of people, especially I know folks that I've worked with, just the populations that I've worked with and different things. I know that is a big concern, literally just not being able to afford that kind of care and a lack of trust, which is a whole other thing. So back to your question. The second therapist, I feel that was important to me. I think we were in a church that was predominantly white. And there was just a lot of things going on in life that I'm oh, it will be somebody that looks like me this go round. Yes. And that wasn't in response to the first person, but I just felt that was necessary. I felt like there were just certain things that were unique to what I felt like I was experiencing in life that someone would understand like without explanation. So that was important. And then this last go round, I wanted a Black therapist and a woman. I just feel like some of the reasons that I went into therapy this time, I knew that I wanted a woman because I just think, right, wrong, or indifferent, there's just a certain level of like sensitivity and care that men don't always have, like just in general. So that was really important to me. And I knew that some of the things that I wanted to speak about, I wouldn't necessarily feel as comfortable with a man discussing those things. So that was a big thing as well. And I think similar to therapist number 2, therapist number 3, in terms of like being Black and a woman as well, like I just really felt I'm at a point in my life that's just like, oh, this is who I am. Like I'm not for everybody. And that's okay. Just like, no, this is me, and really being comfortable and okay. And like knowing who that person is, knowing how I show up, knowing like how I engage. So I really, this go round, like really needed someone that understood and that it was just like, oh, this is what it is, because I don't have time for the foolishness. So, yes.
And you happen to be blessed that they got you, like at least this third woman that you talk about, like that this is how she shows up. Like you had this expectation and that is how she showed up for you. So sounds like that's a real blessing. And
yeah, she's been wonderful. I think the ways in which she has gone about things, which again, therapist number 1, in the moment and for a season, it was helpful. Like what she had to offer, what was provided was beneficial. And I think that there was a point that I was just like, okay, I've kind of outgrown this or need something different. And also just some healing taking place and like, oh, okay, this is not necessary anymore. And I think with therapist number 2, if I felt like I wasn't getting what I needed, I feel like I'm very like involved in my care and just like, hey, like I'm showing up. This is what like I want to talk about. Like these are the things. Like what is the homework? This like I don't want to say it's just systematic for me, but like I feel very clear and self-aware of like these are the issues. Like these are the things that I want to address. So yeah. Anyway, even with therapist number 3, we've had some dialogue and even earlier on about like just expectations and sessions. So I feel like I'm very like forthcoming about things. Like one of the things that we discussed is that I felt like our calls at the end were like rushed, like we were trying to do too much housekeeping and it was very like abrupt. So that was like one of the things, in the beginning, okay, well, we need to allow this much time, whether that's to schedule the next appointment or if there's like any housekeeping is not the right word, but for lack of a better term or whatnot, so those were things that we worked through. Yeah.
You mentioned that you're very involved in your care and, you kind of have this idea of the things that you want for the different sessions. What do you think influenced you in having this approach? Because one of the reasons that I started these series of charlas with people about finding a therapist is because not everyone has that motivation or that clarity, right? And you even mentioned a little earlier how in the beginning it was like, what do I look for, right? So how did you go from what do I look for in a therapist to kind of feeling confident about this is who I want, this is who I need, and this is actually some of the things that I want to take out of therapy?
So I think like just over time, like just living life, life doesn't always come with experience, but in most instances that is the case. So just like living a little bit longer and learning more about mental health and learning more about these various modalities. And some of that came from the friend that I mentioned earlier that was a social worker. So knowing like, oh, okay, like what are the ways, like I know how I'm wired or how I best learn or how I receive information. So taking that, doing a Google search, like, hey, this is, whether this is the type of issue like that I'm addressing, or these are the type of ways I would like to engage in, and really seeing what came up with that and doing some research around that. So Psychology Today was a resource that I used often, and you can put like specific, whether that's issues that you're wanting to focus on or what's the word that I want to say? Issues that you want to focus on or certain specialties that you want the therapist to have in there. So that has been a valuable resource. So I think just learning more about like, oh, this worked, or like, talk therapy, not so much. Like, what are the things, I want to see certain results and different things like that. So I think, again, just becoming more aware of mental health and just doing some research. But I think that therapist friend got me thinking about that. And that was kind of the seed that allowed me to continue on that journey, even this go round. And even as things have shifted, or some of the things that I was in therapy for originally have changed, like evaluating, okay, what tools in your toolbox, because she's been a therapist for a very long time, like what are the things that I may want to try in this season? I think to your other question, in terms of being proactive in my care, I know when I first started going to her, I was like, okay, these are the things and this is how it's affecting my life. And I really wasn't sure like what the sessions would look like, because we were still getting to know each other and all of that. I know I like homework. I'm like, what is the homework? What do you want me to do before I see you again? Like, yes, let's just not talk about it. Let's be about that life. So that was like a real thing, which is funny. I have to mention that when I meet with her next. Like, it's not been a lot of homework going on these last couple of months, which is interesting, the irony with that. And I think just as I've gotten learning the person, because I think honestly, like therapy, just like finding a doctor, and I'll use a gynecologist, I think as the best example, like as women, we need to go to the gynecologist. You reach a certain age, like different things, you should go regularly. And you don't necessarily have the opportunity to be like, oh, let me feel you out first. You can review the website, you can talk to the receptionist, but you don't know until you're there with them. And unfortunately, even after you've had your exam and they don't work out, you feel, let me speak from the eye perspective, I feel frustrated. Like, you was just literally in between my legs and like, you're not going to work out, so I have to find somebody else. This is so ridiculous. But what am I going to do? Continue to come to you and I don't feel comfortable? Or not go to somebody else? Like, there's limited options. So it's just like, dang, here we go with that song and dance again. So I think in a lot of ways, like with therapy, it's true, after 2 or 3 sessions, if you're not sure, I think that's a good, but yeah, it sucks. You fill out all that paperwork, you can tell these people all your business, and then sometimes it is not a good fit. And that is not, in my opinion, is not reason enough to be like, oh, well, I just won't do it.
Absolutely loved your analogy. I love that you said, well, this happened and it kind of sucked, but that's not enough of a reason for you to not continue to do this.
I mean, another example, it's like if, something is wrong with your water heater or something and you pay somebody to come out and fix it and they do a bad job, like, what are you going to do? Not have air? Like, you're just going to let it continue to leak? Like, you have to try to resolve it with them. If they're not amenable, you have to pay somebody else. Like, it just comes with the playing field. And I think that we don't often consider that like for ourselves, and things that are less tangible. You're like, oh, I cannot go without air. I need the refrigerator to work. But oh my, you need like your mental health to be okay. You need to be in a safe space with yourself. You need to know yourself. Like, these are definitely necessities. And I just think, maybe a little bit more now, at least in America, a little bit more now with some of the things the last few years, and people are becoming a little bit more aware. But I mean, I definitely get like in this society where it's just like, do more, be better, no time for rest, grind, all of these signals and just social messages that we get. I can see why people would take it that way. But like, we only get one body, like we only get one mind, we only get one life. Like, it would behoove us to care for it and care for ourselves well, the same ways in which we care for our friends. I have a really good friend, something that she'll say, and it's like a running thing between us when we're having a hard time, but I'll be talking about what I'm stressed about, what I haven't been able to fix in myself yet, blah, 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 what I haven't been able to do in the house, whatever, the moaning and groanings of the day are. And she's like, be nice to my friend, be nice to my friend, talking to me being her friend, telling me to be nice to myself. And, we just often don't show ourselves the same compassion and grace that we show for other people. Like, for the most part, I would just go out on a limb and say, if our friend is having a hard day, we're not like, well, you put it on the list, like, you need to get it done. You've been talking about it all this time. What do you mean, you feel sad today? But ourselves, like, it's like we constantly have the whip, or at least it's been my experience with myself for a large part of my life. Just keep on with the lashes. Like, man, can you give some grace? What is happening? So yes, be kind to yourself. Treat yourself how you would treat your friend.
That's really powerful. I absolutely love like the analogies that you give, and Yeah, just this is such a visual. I love the gynecologist. I love the, water heater. It really is so powerful. And, I think as we come to our closing, you said something also really powerful, which I would love if you could share with us a little bit about, which was access and trust, right? So what about access and trust in relationship to a person who's desiring who's contemplating the idea of having mental health and thinking about how did you maybe overcome it, or how did you approach it, or what can you share, like some words of wisdom that you can share if a person is encountering maybe even self-doubts that are very much founded, right? Because they've had experiences with systems that are not trusting, that are not accessible because of who they are. So yeah, like maybe not so much of a question, but words of wisdom and your experience around accessibility and trust.
Got you. I think the first thing that comes to mind is just not to give up. I know that's kind of generic, but really you think about, I think about the things usually that are going on with us, they don't resolve themselves and go away on their own. There's usually some point, some intervention, whether that's therapy or not, but something happens, whether our perception about it changes and that alleviates it, someone is removed, whatever the case may be, like these things will not go away on their own. So I guess I just really would want to share that, they may be less heightened in some seasons than others. Other priorities may come and take the place, but they just go, those feelings, those emotions, those things that we aren't able to make sense of and kind of work through, heal through. I know people go to therapy for a myriad of different reasons. It won't go away on its own. And not, what's the word that I want to say? The potency of the pain may not be as potent in different seasons, but it's still there. So I would just encourage people, to continue the search. Maybe I know it's a vulnerable topic. I know that it can be very uncomfortable. I'm Black, I'm a woman. I know, given a lot of populations that I've worked with have been vulnerable populations, youth, people that are incarcerated in detention centers, in group homes. There's so many other powers that play that come to play in their care and treatment. People that have very valid reasons not to trust, certain people or systems or different things like that. I would just say that, good people are out there. Good people are out there. And even if you've had a bad experience, like I'm so sorry that that's been your experience. And that really sucks, especially when you're seeking help and are having a difficult time. And it's worth it not to give up and to continue to search for those resources and tools. Maybe some of those things are referrals, so that it's someone that you know personally that has utilized someone, but not giving up on those things, because your mental health, like your well-being, is just worth it.
Thank you so much. That was very beautiful. I really appreciated all your stories. And are there any additional thoughts that you have before we close? Yes,
I have one thought. I would just say, which is kind of like what I've already said, but like it's worth the risk. It's worth the risk. The risk to be vulnerable, the risk to, again, there may be concerns like they're writing these things down or whatever the case may be, but it's worth the risk for you to get the help that you need.
That sounds like that's going to be the title of this blog post. That was beautiful.
Thank you so much for having me.
A therapist is worth the risk. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate to have your voice in this series. Thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this charla, make sure to subscribe. If you want more information about Mindgration, connect through the link on the description below. And join me next time in this space where we can explore how the mind, body, and soul can thrive in this adopted land called home.